I do want to elaborate on some of the things that Rita brought out in the PowerPoint. And when I talk to local education officials and when they send out memos to their teachers and when educators in Mississippi talk to the media, I was told by one of the reporters that the Department of Education clearly said that grants were not involved in the adoption of Common Core, and that was not how we got there. So I have made a bunch of copies of the June 25th, 2010 board minutes for the State Department of Education, and I will leave those on the back in case you would like a copy. I didn't make enough for everybody, but in case you want a copy of those board minutes, I did make those. And I'd like to read to you how the Common Core standards were adopted and why. On a motion by Dr. O. Wayne Gann, seconded by Mr. Claude Hartley, the board voted unanimously to adopt the Common Core state standards for mathematics as a temporary rule to become effective immediately based on finding of imminent peril to public welfare and the loss of substantial federal funds from Race to the Top grant, and that the board begin the APA process to adopt Common Core state standards for mathematics. And the next line, number 10, says the same thing based on adoption of the English Language Arts standards. So it's very clear in the board minutes that the impetus to adopt Common Core standards was the Race to the Top money. And the board has also said that you did not have to adopt Common Core in the Race to the Top, but you could not get all the points in the grant. You couldn't get the substantial amount of points unless you did adopt Common Core. So in order to compete for the grant competitively, you had to adopt Common Core, and you had to set up a statewide longitudinal data system. That was the biggest two things that were required for competition in Race to the Top during the 2009 stimulus. And you know, all of you have heard some of our current leaders in Washington, D.C. say never let a good crisis go to waste. Well, the federal government certainly took advantage of this economic crisis in 2009 with putting federal money out there to try to get states to sign on to do what they wanted to do and nationalize our curriculum. It is very evident by what's going on in Washington, D.C. that the national standards and the testing consortium funded by the federal government is only the tip of the iceberg in how far the federal government and the Department of Education wants to go to take total control over education in the states. Most of you have been kind of distracted because of the Obamacare and the government shutdown that's going on, but there is a battle going on regarding this very topic in the Congress in Washington, D.C. There is a bill that has been voted out of the Senate Education Committee that was authored by Senator Tom Harkins called the Strengthening America's Schools Act. That bill basically gave Arne Duncan the walking papers to be the National Superintendent of Education, and it basically set the federal government up to be more or less a national school board in that bill. And you have opposition on both sides of the political aisle. If any of you have read Diane Ravitch's blog, she initially supported national standards, but she has seen the kind of shady way this thing has been brought in and implemented, and she has even questioned the federal government's role in education. And we're on a very, very slippery slope here whenever we have a bill that is out there in your face in the Senate in the United States that would basically ignore the Constitution and ignore the 3 federal laws that says the Department of Education cannot have any direction, any real effect on a state's standards, curriculum, or testing. And they've already violated that through using third-party proxies to do their work, and they funded these third-party proxies to be one step removed so that it wouldn't look like the federal government was actually doing it. But if you believe that the curriculum won't be dictated by the test items, then you better think again, because we all know our kids have been taking MCT2 in Mississippi, and we know that we had textbooks that were written specifically for Mississippi Algebra 1, MCT2. So the curriculum will certainly be developed and is being developed by the testing consortiums and these partners with Pearson. So we've even gotten so far as having a federal review process. Common Core assessment groups to undergo new federal review process. So there's already been created a panel of 7 by the Department of Education who will review every item on the test that the consortium is going to give. So if you don't have federal influence in your testing and then therefore in your curriculum, think again, because it is already being done. The federal government has already set up a review panel to look at every test item and look at the structure of the test item, the content, and to say whether they deem that this is an appropriate test question. So it's out there. All you have to do is go to the government websites and look. All you have to do is go and listen to videos of Arnie Duncan, Louis Gerstner, or any of these other major players in the Common Core movement, or you listen to David Coleman. One of the most disturbing things that I've heard is a video that David Coleman, who is now the national president of the College Board, David Coleman basically has a video that I watched just a couple of nights ago that says, with all this data that we're going to collect from your children and your families, we have the ability to change the world. So what their intent is to, and he basically said we're going to have the same data geniuses and messengers to create messaging and work with this data to basically build what the tech companies are looking at as an economic stimulus package for educational marketers through your children's data. But if you listen closely to David Coleman in his video, you will tell that he is absolutely giddy about the potential of having this data all collected in one spot for certain political operatives to be able to use that data to, I believe, direct policy. I think that's their ultimate goal. The evidence is out there. I think with the evidence that you can find, you could probably try this case and prove it in a court of law of what the intent of the federal government is. So it's happened very, very fast. Like I said, we've been distracted first by a presidential election, then by Obamacare, and now by the government shutdown. But it was done very similar to healthcare. We had to sign on to it in 2010. But the full rollout is not happening until this year, and then the testing next year. So we've gotten this far down the road, and critics are saying, well, we're too far in it. Why did you wait till now to question it? Well, guess what? Whenever you post something on a website and you only have less than 50 people that you bring in as potential review committee for Race to the Top grant, and the standards were released on June 2nd, and the state board adopted the standards, voted to begin the APA process on June 25th. That's 3 weeks and 2 days. I hardly believe that is ample time for any parent or school district or anybody else to vet what we're signing on to. That's something that's so significant and has the potential to have such a great impact on everyday lives. And it's absolutely evident that no consideration was given to the local state education agencies in how they would pay for, how they would logistically handle this, because the standards writers knew that there would not be ample curriculum out there, that they would be struggling to find curriculum, and like you said, they're writing the curriculum as they go. So this was done to try to get the money without having any type of consideration for what kind of hardships it was going to place on the folks in the local school districts to be able to implement this and to do a good job. And you know, what we continually do is we continually make the job of educating our children harder and harder based on what some bureaucrat says is going to be the next best thing to sliced bread, and it's going to cure all our problems. And you have seen the business community engage in Common Core and come in and say we're supportive of this, because they have been sold that this is a workforce development program that's going to give you better skilled applicants for jobs. Okay? That's kind of what their take is on it, is, you know, whether we have any valid data out there that says this is going to do anything positive. The business community, along with the Gates Foundation and some of the others, have said, well, you know, we need to try this. And And Bill Gates has gone on record as saying it'll be a decade down the road before we really know if we've done anything positive. So, you know, but he's put all the money out there, and he's put grants in the hands of every potential educational stakeholder on the planet, including the state of Mississippi he's given a check to make sure that this continues to roll out. And quite honestly, when the states began to really sink in and the folks realized what was going on, because this never went through the legislature. Nobody ever voted on it in the legislature. The ones who were there before me, they didn't hear about it. Unless they went and read a little portion on the State Department of Education's website or on the Secretary of State's website, they had no idea. There was less than 50 people that were brought in from various walks of life in the state of Mississippi to kind of serve as a rubber stamp committee to be a Race to the Top advisory committee. So it happened fast, and we're only now beginning to find out exactly what it amounts to, and we're only now just beginning to find out what the intent of those who created this movement, this initiative, truly have in mind for the federal education. Arnie Duncan has come out and said, and in this Strengthen America Schools Act that just passed the Senate Education Committee, they basically say we will have a greater shared responsibility, okay? I don't like those words. The Constitution says education should be local, should be left up to the states.
Right.
But when you have a bill passed through the Senate Education Committee in Washington, D.C. that basically gives way, way more control than a state, than a federal government education chief should have over education, the radar better go up. And the way Arnie Duncan proposes to continue to get this control is through grants to the schools. And everybody wants a grant, okay? Arnie Duncan has also said that he wants to totally restructure the way schools operate in the community. He wants what's called 21st century community-based schools. There are already grants in this state, in neighboring counties, to extend the school hours, to keep children in school for 12 hours a day. $875 million grant over 4 years to a neighboring county. The federal government is $16.8 trillion in debt. Yet, we can't give teachers the amount of money that they really deserve to do a good job in the classrooms, because all the money is going toward an agenda. It never makes it to the classroom. There's always money to be found for somebody's agenda or somebody's program, but we never get to what makes other countries have exceptional education programs, and that is they elevate the status of the teacher in society and in the culture. In this new program, in this Common Core initiative, and in the M-STAR teacher evaluation system, teachers are no longer called teachers. If you read through all the paperwork, teachers are now facilitators of learning. Okay? So we're facilitators of an initiative that's been developed by an outside group. If that doesn't sound like we have less control, I don't know what does. We have Louis Gerstner and Arnie Duncan saying that we need more federal control. Louis Gerstner's gone so far, and Mark Tucker's gone so far as saying we don't need any more local boards of education. We want to totally abolish them, make them service organizations only. So the very people who have gotten on board with Common Core and done the best that they can to implement this and have tried to promote it and stay positive about it, and I totally understand that, because that's their job and that's their livelihood. And nobody wants to do a job that they don't like what they're doing. But these are the very people who stand to lose the most, along with the students and parents, from the vision that these folks in the Federal Department of Education have, or the local school superintendents and the local school boards. Because inch by inch and check by check, the control is moving to Washington, D.C.
That's right.
We have to decide whether in Mississippi we want to contact our legislators and say that we need to halt this Common Core thing, pending a further evaluation, cost analysis, standards comparison. We have conflicting standards comparisons already from Mississippi's current set of standards. The Fordham Institute, who's been paid by the Gates Foundation to do curriculum alignment or do standards alignment studies for every state in the union, They have said that Mississippi's math standards are really not too bad. Said they have good STEM content. They need to be have a little more clarity here and there, but overall they're pretty good. We'll give them a C. The four of them said that Mississippi's language arts standards are so bad they're not even on the scale. They're among the worst in the country. But yet the group that Mississippi Department of Education contracted to do our alignment to Common Core, SCDL's Comprehensive Center out of Georgia, they say the exact opposite of what the Fordham Institute says. SCDL says that Mississippi's math is so horrible that it's not on the scale, but that Mississippi's language arts are similar rigor and content of Common Core, and there won't be a whole lot of work to get our standards in line with Common Core. And I posed that question to the State Superintendent of Education. The Senate Conservative Coalition posed that question to explain the conflicting alignment study. And really we didn't get a satisfactory answer, but what we did get from the questions was, these standards are just goals, and how they're implemented in the classroom is really what matters. And that goes back to a study from the Brookings Institution at Brown University. Through the years, every time a new set of standards has been implemented in the states, the tests that they're teaching year from year, they might go up a little bit because they're learning more about how to teach the test. But on an overall scale, every time we have set a new set of standards or upgraded standards, ACTs have basically been flat in Mississippi for 20 years. So they've never really got to the core of what goes on in a classroom. So the whole idea that Common Core is going to be a panacea or a cure-all for everything that ails education is basically invalidated by the own words of the state superintendent. So I'm here because parents asked me to be here. Parents called me and said, will you come do an informational meeting? And I said, anywhere that a parent wants to look at this and look at the facts and not subjective innuendo, and basically look at where this came from and look at the evidence of where it's possibly going, then I will come and share with them. So my concern is we're going to lose control eventually. And nobody in Washington, D.C. or in any trade organization that's been propped up or paid off by Bill Gates knows what the communities in Mississippi and the schools in Mississippi and the parents deem appropriate and valid education for their students. That's the reason why the founders did not put the federal government in charge of education. All the countries that perform above us on these international tests, decentralization is a common theme. Okay? Now, we keep hearing how bad we do on these international tests. And we are down there if you look at our average scores. But I looked at a research that came from the Stanford University School of Higher Education. Their teacher college. And it basically said that the United States of America tests way more socioeconomically disadvantaged children than these other countries that score above us on these national tests. And if we account for that and adjust the numbers to account and make that equitable, then our scores go about halfway back up. So yes, we can always do better, but these tests and those researchers at Stanford basically think that there's been an agenda, especially in 2009, that there was way more socioeconomically disadvantaged children tested in 2009. So you've got to set the criteria and set the stage. So looking at these tests and basically making a knee-jerk reaction to these standardized tests was one way that they've been able to try to sell this thing that we need to be globally competitive. But we're still globally competitive now. And our students in the state of Mississippi that go to schools that are doing their job and they go to good schools, these students in Mississippi can compete with anybody. They absolutely can. So we need to take a step back and see if trading our autonomy and our control over education is worth what we're giving up. I mean, if we've got to decide as a people, and it's up to you to decide and to look at what's out there and make the decision. But the things that I see in my profession and what I've seen through the years, it's been little by little moving in that direction toward more federal control. But this is like the healthcare. This is a huge jump. Did you ever think that you would have the federal government telling an insurance company exactly what coverage limits and how much profit they can make? I never thought I'd see it. But we're seeing the same things in education. It may be a little bit more subtle, but you're still boiling the frog. You're turning the heat up little by little.
That's right.
And I'm here to tell you that the intent is for stronger, more centralized federal government. And the evidence is there. And my bill that I'm going to file this January, and I'm going to have a bunch of co-authors from my Senate Conservative Coalition, is to do exactly what Governor Mike Pence did in Indiana, is to halt that implementation of Common Core and allow Mississippi the time to do a thorough evaluation and look at whether we want to take our standards that we've had and have those upgraded and certified by one of our colleges and universities as college and career ready, and what we're going to do about testing, okay? I know that folks question the amount of money that we would spend, but I think if everything was laid out there on the table, we probably wouldn't see that we would be much more in the hole if we were in control of our own education.
That's right.
So, thank y'all very much.